We're here at Concordia Summit, and I'm with Jacquelline Fuller. She is the Director of Google Giving at Google. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So tell us about Google Giving and the overall initiative at the world's largest tech company around.
Sure. Well, we're big believers in technology, as you might imagine. And what we want to do is look out globally around the world and find the best tech innovators, people who are using breakthrough technology, super innovative approaches that can bring transformation at a meaningful scale. So we find these entrepreneurs, find these startups, and want to help scale them.
Great. And are these throughout the whole world?
Yeah, absolutely, globally.
Are you seeing any trends, like any projects recently that you've been working on that you're really excited about?
Well, one of the things we're looking at is how do we take today's sort of cutting edge technologies and make sure that they're being used and harnessed for good as well. So one that was a little bit kind of shocking to folks when we did it this year was we're funding World Wildlife Fund to work and use drones for conservation.
Wow.
So there's only about 400 rhinos. We're going to lose rhinos. We're going to lose elephants. They're going to become extinct. We need to do something very quickly. So we also supported International Barcode of Life, for example, to use DNA indexing, which is something that's being used commercially, to say how can we use this to stop the illegal wildlife trade.
Got it. Wow, that is really unique. So I'm sure you work with a spectrum of projects. That's incredible. So public-private partnerships is obviously the theme today.
Yeah.
How have any case studies, really successful recent partnerships that Google has been involved in that you might want to share?
Oh, absolutely. So I'll just pick one off the top of my head. So we've been looking at the issue of clean water, for example, and thinking about also more generally, not just with clean water, but in the development sector, how can we help increase the resources that are going to development, but also help ship them to the most effective organizations, right? So for example, if you look at clean water, at any given time, a third of the wells in the developing world aren't working. So we don't just need more wells being drilled and photos being taken of the well. We need to know 3 years out, 5 years out, are those wells still working? Are they still in existence? So we worked with Charity Water to build sensors. Exactly, love Scott. So to develop sensors that you can put on water sources to know in real time, is clean water flowing? Are these wells effective? And the interesting thing about Charity Water as a partner is that they were absolutely willing to not only gather this data, but make it available on the web.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Sorry, we'll just pause 1 second. Can you guys just lower your voice for a second? Thank you. Luckily it's pre-taped. Yeah, I mean, it is so, because I know so many organizations involved, with Face Africa to, obviously focus on specific regions, and that is, to think of it from that technology side is super important.
Our company was built on data, and we want to help make philanthropy in general more data-driven. So we can also help counter this notion that, oh, it's money down a rat hole, it's not really effective. Well, let's measure. Let's find out who's really doing the most effective work and how we can deploy that marginal dollar to the most effective work.
It's so fascinating to me because, Google being such a famous company, you always hear about their acquisitions and you hear about, new launches, but you rarely hear about the giving side, and it's just tremendous. I mean, it all makes sense as you explain it to me, but is there an effort? I mean, obviously, as CSR and sustainability, do you see giving becoming more and more of a priority at Google in terms of, from a PR perspective or just an investment perspective? It's obviously been a growing, department, in terms of just philanthropy in general and most large corporations.
Well, look, our giving and wanting to be the best corporate citizen and to back the best tech innovators around the world comes directly from our founders. So if you read the letter from the founders before they even had their IPO, they laid out very clearly there that it was very important to them to take a portion of who we are and what we do and allocate that to help really make the world a better place and to change the world philanthropically.
Yeah.
So it's not just money. Money is part of what we invest,
Sure.
but for every partner that we have, for every grantee, we provide not only cash, but the Googlers around them to say, okay, can our engineers help develop those sensors? Can our engineers help with that DNA indexing?
Right. So it's a collaboration effort as well. They have
Absolutely.
access to your
Yeah.
engineers and your resources.
Yeah.
Are the founders very involved in all the, or do they obviously get to see all the different projects you're working on
Yeah.
regularly? It's exciting. So investing in the youth, which is, again, a big theme here at Concordia, are you seeing, I mean, you're in such a unique position because, the youth today are growing up using Google and in terms of, areas of any projects or initiatives that are solely focused on youth, either domestically or overseas, or I'm sure many of your other causes touch on youth, like Girls Who Code, for example, which
yeah,
you mentioned.
sure. One of the most exciting things that we're working on now is an effort to get more girls and underrepresented minorities into the STEM careers. So it's so important. If you look only at the US, for example, at the growth of new jobs, the preponderance of STEM jobs, 80% are in computer science and engineering. And that's where we're not making the gains for girls and minorities. So in fact, with computer science, in biology, women are now getting 60% of the degrees, right? Chemistry, we've made great strides, physics. But if you look at computer science, we're actually moving backwards.
Yeah.
So, and that is so important, not just for the individual, because they're going to gain because those jobs are plentiful, right? And they're well-paying jobs. So the individuals are all going to do well. But it's also important as a society because computer scientists, we are the ones who are literally coding the future.
Absolutely.
And when we're thinking about what products we develop, what needs are we meeting, who are we reaching, and how can we best help them, it's so important to make sure that
women
you have
involved.
people at the table. Women and also underrepresented minorities who come from the communities and can bring that extra vision.
Right. Why it's so interesting, that we see such lower numbers in computer science and engineering, and I think a lot of that has to do with role models.
Absolutely.
Like, oh hey, I want to be a doctor when I grow up versus an engineer and work in technology. And it is I think that getting more and more women in tech, being mentors or companies investing in getting those women out there more is super important.
It's the big picture as well as the narrow cast. So we're looking at this now because fundamentally we need to change the narrative around computer science.
Right.
If you ask girls today, middle school, high school girls, would you consider a career in computer science? Their stereotype is, oh, it's a geeky white male who plays with Star Trek figurines and sits in a room by himself and codes all day. And that's not at all what the career is about. And so we're thinking about, how do we change that narrative so girls understand, computer science is the way to change the future. I can do meaningful things and help change the world, and people like me are good at it.
Right. Wow, how do we do that?
Well, let me just give you one example.
Please.
So there was an article in the Wall Street Journal today about a study that looked at just by giving girls two different articles, one that portrayed more diversity in computer science and one that didn't, fundamentally and meaningfully shifted the percentage of girls who said that they were interested in majoring in computer science. So it's not like we have to do like these geological massive shifts here. Sometimes it can just be a little thing. Like right now, if you ask girls who are going into college, what they want to major in, a lot of them are saying forensic science. Which, I mean, who even knew what that was, right? But you know why? It's because of Bones, and it's because of CSI, right? So all of a sudden they were seeing on TV an interesting career that women were doing and were good at. We saw the same thing actually with doctors, and so shows like Grey's Anatomy and others, you saw a huge lift in women considering becoming doctors. You saw this with lawyers and Law and Order. So I think we need the next great show on computer scientists.
Absolutely. And then it'll be really exciting too to see more. So many of the famous tech companies are founded by men. And there is a huge boom in investing in women tech entrepreneurs, and there have been a lot of exits, and it'll just be really exciting to see more and more you know, of those women, you know, because it's you know, technology is becoming very mainstream in many ways, you know, in terms of, you know, news on technology. I know we both know Mashable, and you know, like just seeing the fact that they're including more articles on, you know, women, women, you know, innovating and all of that.
We're making some strides, but you know what's really interesting is at Google recently we took a look at our own data and said, you know, we want to help make this better in the world, but let's start with ourselves. And we looked at our data and said, you know, we think we're better than the industry, but we could do even better.
Yeah, well, you're setting the standards in many ways.
We want to be the absolute leaders in this and do even better. And so we started to look at our own data and where, you know, where might it be happening and what's behind it. And what we uncovered is there's a lot of unconscious bias, and meaning that these are not people sitting down thinking I'm going to lock women out of this room, or I'm going to create a hostile environment for someone who comes from a low-income background. But there are a lot of subtle biases that we all bring to the table.
Right.
And so we're encouraging our teams to go through unconscious bias testing and just look creatively at how can we ensure that we're not differentially weeding out people in our hiring process.
That's really powerful. Unconscious bias. That's really, really powerful.
There's testing you can do on the internet if you
I'm scared to know how much you know about me.
Use your favorite search engine to look up unconscious bias testing, and it's amazing. Yeah,
it's great. And you know, and you came from the Gates Foundation. My last question is, you know, how has that transition been from, you know, foundation to, you know, foundation fitting into, you know, the largest companies in the world? Has it been a really exciting, I'm sure, time and the differences?
So, you know, it's funny, people say, oh, Gates and Google, you're on other sides of, you know, competitive tech companies. But what's interesting is how many similarities I see in that, you know, technologists bring a certain mindset to solving problems. And a lot of that is very good, very pragmatic. You know, I'm not going to get ideological about what's the best approach. I'm just going to be very pragmatic.
Sure.
Show me the data.
Yes.
You know, so very much both cultures. Show me the data. Huge belief in technology and the optimism around it. I'd say what's a little bit different is that Gates Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates chose very early on the focus areas that they were interested in, particularly global health and education, and just stuck with them, you know, for a long time. I think Google is more of a launch and iterate approach, where we're saying, let's try a variety of things. Okay, this worked. We saw more success here. Let's move in this direction. So that's
the cultural change. But you know, definitely an exciting one. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
This was wonderful.
Yeah, thanks for having me.